The camera opens on a quiet room in New York City in 1944. Outside the windows, the world is still on fire. Europe is in ruins. Asia is exhausted. Empires are collapsing under the weight of war. Inside the room, men in dark suits sit at long wooden tables, papers stacked neatly in front of them. Their pens move slowly, deliberately. They are not drawing borders or signing peace treaties. They are designing something far more subtle and far more enduring, the financial architecture of the post-war world. None of them say it aloud, but they all understand the stakes. Whoever controls the system everyone else must use will not need to conquer territory with armies. Power will flow automatically, invisibly, every single day. To understand why the world cannot quit the United States today, you have to begin here, not with speeches or politics, but with plumbing. Money, like water, follows the pipes that already exist. At Bretton Woods, the delegates didn't simply choose rules for currency exchange. They locked in a dependency. The United States emerged from the war with something no other nation had: intact factories, overwhelming industrial capacity, and nearly 3/4 of the world's gold reserves. When the dollar was pegged to gold and every other major currency was pegged to the dollar, the system seemed neutral, even generous. The dollar became the bridge everyone could cross. But bridges charge tolls, even when the toll is invisible. In the early years, the system felt stabilizing. War-torn nations needed dollars to rebuild. American factories shipped steel, machinery, and food across oceans in exchange for paper claims on U.S. productivity. Dollars accumulated abroad, and no one worried much about what that meant. After all, the dollar was as good as gold. But embedded inside this promise was a quiet contradiction. For the world to grow, it needed more dollars. For the dollar to remain truly backed by gold, the U.S. had to limit how many it created. Growth demanded abundance. Credibility demanded scarcity. This tension did not explode immediately, it simmered. By the late 1960s, cracks were visible. The U.S. was fighting a costly war in Vietnam while expanding social programs at home. Dollars poured out faster than gold flowed in. Foreign governments began to notice. If everyone tried to redeem their dollars for gold at once, the vaults would empty. In 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. The promise ended with a televised announcement. From that moment on, the dollar was no longer backed by metal, but by something far more abstract and far more powerful: trust in the United States itself. Many believe this should have been the dollar's death. Why would the world continue to hold a currency no longer tied to gold? But instead of collapsing, the dollar adapted. The trap was tightening, not loosening. The U.S. struck deals that ensured oil, the most important commodity of the industrial age, would be priced and traded in dollars. If a country wanted energy, it needed dollars. If it needed dollars, it had to earn them through trade or borrow them through U.S.-centered financial markets. The currency was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by global necessity. At this point, the dollar stopped being merely money. It became infrastructure. Central banks didn't just hold dollars for transactions. They held them as reserves, as insurance against crises. International debt contracts were written in dollars. Corporations borrowed in dollars because lenders trusted its stability. Even countries that resented U.S. political power found themselves unable to escape the financial gravity. The more everyone used dollars, the more essential dollars became. This is the core of the dollar trap. Usage creates dependency, and dependency reinforces usage. Consider what happens when a country wants to grow. It must import technology, energy, machinery, or food. Many of these are priced in dollars. To get dollars, the country exports goods or services, often to the United States itself. This creates a feedback loop where global production feeds American consumption, while global savings pile into U.S. assets. The United States can run persistent trade deficits without facing the immediate penalties other countries would suffer. The dollars sent abroad do not vanish. They return as investments in U.S. bonds, stocks, and real estate. This arrangement has consequences. When the U.S. prints money, the effects are not contained within its borders. Dollars circulate globally, influencing inflation, asset prices, and capital flows everywhere. During crises, money rushes toward the dollar, not away from it. Investors flee emerging markets and buy U.S. Treasury bonds, even when U.S. policies helped cause the instability. The dollar strengthens precisely when trust elsewhere collapses. Safety is relative, and the dollar benefits from being the least fragile option in an unstable system it helped shape. Attempts to escape this reality have appeared many times. Europe introduced the euro with hopes of challenging dollar dominance. China internationalized the yuan through trade agreements and payment systems. Russia experimented with non-dollar energy sales. Each effort reduced marginal dependence, but none overturned the structure. Why? Because replacing a global currency is not about declaring independence. It requires replicating the entire ecosystem: deep financial markets, legal predictability, military security of trade routes, and the willingness to absorb global savings without panic. This is where the trap tightens further. The U.S. does not merely issue the dominant currency. It provides the assets the world prefers to hold. U.S. Treasury bonds are considered the safest collateral in the financial system. Banks use them to settle obligations, and central banks use them to stabilize currencies. When stress rises, demand for these assets increases, lowering U.S. borrowing costs. The more uncertain the world becomes, the cheaper it is for the U.S. to finance itself. What would bankrupt other nations becomes sustainable for America. Sanctions reveal the other side of this power. When the U.S. restricts access to dollar clearing systems, it can effectively freeze nations out of global trade. Assets held in dollars can be immobilized. Transactions can be blocked. This is not just political leverage, it is structural control. Countries now face a dilemma. Using the dollar grants efficiency and access, avoiding the dollar sacrifices, liquidity, and growth. Most choose the first option while quietly searching for alternatives that never fully mature. Even within the United States, the dollar trap has distorted incentives. Persistent deficits are easier to tolerate when financed by global demand for dollar assets. Manufacturing can be outsourced without immediate balance of payments consequences. Consumption remains high, but this comes at a cost: rising debt, financialization of the economy, and inequality linked to asset ownership. The benefits of the system are unevenly distributed, both globally and domestically. Yet dismantling it would require coordinated action. No major power trusts the others to maintain. What would happen if the world truly tried to quit the dollar tomorrow? Trade would slow, exchange rate volatility would rise, credit markets would fracture along regional lines, smaller economies would face capital shortages. The costs would be immediate and visible, while the benefits would be long-term and uncertain. That asymmetry keeps the system locked in place. Everyone knows the structure is imperfect. Few are willing to risk the chaos of transition. The trap is not enforced by law alone. It is reinforced by habit, convenience, and fear. Financial systems reward predictability. The dollar provides it better than any alternative so far. Even rivals build their strategies around it, diversifying cautiously rather than breaking free abruptly. The result is a world that criticizes American dominance while quietly financing it. As the camera pulls back from modern trading floors glowing with digital numbers, the thread leading back to that quiet room in 1944 becomes clear. The dollar's power was never about virtue or morality. It was about sequencing. The U.S. was positioned to write the rules first, and once the rules exist, everyone who follows them strengthens the system further. This is not a conspiracy. It is a structural outcome of how global finance evolves. Understanding this does not require loyalty or hostility toward the United States. It requires recognizing cause and effect. A currency becomes dominant when it solves immediate problems better than alternatives. It stays dominant when replacing it seems riskier than tolerating its flaws. The dollar trap is not a prison with bars. It is a maze where every exit leads to short-term pain and uncertain reward. This video is made only for educational purposes to increase awareness and understanding of how global economic systems operate. If you've watched this far, share your perspective in the comments, raise questions that challenged your assumptions, or suggest future topics you'd like to explore in this documentary-style series.